Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of Dark Powerrr, where we cover everything that happens on AEW Dark, AEW Elevation, and NWA Powerrr. Thank you once again for tuning in. We appreciate every time that you guys hit that like button, comment, share, and subscribe. It allows us to do what we do for you. And this was kind of an interesting episode between the three shows, I gotta say. Interesting in the sense of it was a lull between all three. And that's not that bad. Sometimes you do need a little bit of a break from things, a break from the action. This week we have a Power Surge, and this episode of Power Surge is remembering Joseph Hudson, Josephus, which we will get into. But first, let's talk about AEW Elevation, because if there was a show out of the three that stood out the most, it was Elevation. And they started off really hot with Thunder Rosa taking on Dream Girl Ellie. This one was a nice one that I liked, especially because you just got to see that live crowd aspect that we kind of have been missing. And I know we've been getting that a bit with the most recent Darks and Elevations, but this one just felt different because we knew it was in a different place. We knew it was in Miami, and it just added a different atmosphere to it. And I think Thunder Rosa is someone who capitalizes on having live crowds around. So this one was a good match. I liked the Gun Club and Varsity Blondes teaming with Chaos Project and Acclaimed, and I think the reason why I liked it is not even for the match itself, it's for the Acclaimed. These crowds are going to turn the Acclaimed face very, very quickly, because the Acclaimed, especially Max Caster, particularly Max Caster, but the rapping, coming to the ring with the rapping is really hilarious. And people are going to gravitate towards that. They are going to be heels that the crowd just eats up and loves. And they got to find ways to continue to get heat if they're going to be heels. Now, granted, they can do the, make fun of the local town and all that kind of stuff, and that's fine. But they also got to be able to properly attack your opponents and say things that are dastardly, right? Say things that are true heelish shit. And that really kind of did happen when Bowens suggested that, okay, so they lose the match. Chaos Project and Acclaim lose the match. After the match, Bowens points out that Varsity Blondes are ranked number 2, Acclaimed are ranked number 3. So if they want the tag titles, they got to go through the Varsity Blondes. So they say that the Varsity Blondes should get back into the ring, or if they're scared or whatever, go to the back and Eiffel Tower the girl that's with them, meaning Julia Hart. Now, I don't know if Julia Hart knows what that means, but if she does or doesn't, either way, she looked like she didn't. And that worked very well in the favor of Bowens making the joke, or making the insult. Not really an insult, but okay, the insult. And that's the kind of stuff that they need to continue to do to get heat. It doesn't always have to be sexual in nature, but it does need to be attacking. It does need to be biting. It does need to make you be like, oh shit, you should not be saying that. They should push the boundaries as much as they can. Now, the next match that stood out to me was kind of weird in that it should not have been standing out to me. This was Jungle Boy taking on Lee Johnson. And this one was weird to me because, I don't know. I think what felt off to me about this one was that they promoted this match with a backstage segment with Dustin and Lee Johnson, and they promoted it with a backstage segment with Jungle Boy. So in my mind, I'm expecting this to be the main event. This was not the main event. So that part, I think, is what threw me. The match itself is really, really good. Lee Johnson had some great moments in this match and showed why if Jungle Boy is shifting from the future to the present, then Lee Johnson is quickly becoming the future of AEW. And Jungle Boy has a great line in his promo where he says, I'm on to, I've done the 50 wins, first to 50 wins. Now I want to be the first to 51. And that's just a great line because it's that hunger for more. And that's something that's very, very important in wrestling, particularly if you're a babyface. You have to have that hunger for more and that desire to keep winning. I liked the moment with Joel saying that he was going to be part of the Hardy family office, and he will be part of the Hardy family office in the next match where he's with Private Party, and then he'll also be on AEW Dark. What I liked about this is self-contained storylines within Dark and Elevation, and that's what they really, really need. They need that desperately with Dark and Elevation as hooks, which is part of the reason why, if you're going to promo a match like Jungle Boy and Lee Johnson, I'm expecting it to be the main event. But speaking of the main event, our main event is Darby Allin taking on Angelico. This one I thought was a pretty good match, pretty good main event match, and I liked it. Like, this was a nice moment because for an Elevation crowd, they get to see Sting. Sting's with Darby, and yeah, that's not supposed to be the main event attraction. It's not supposed to be Darby's manager or valet or whatever you want to say Sting is. But it is a nice bonus. It is an added bonus to give Elevation more gravitas, more weight, more reason for it to be important. Sting can appear. And who knows, maybe down the road we'll get a Sting match on Elevation and minds will be blown. But let's turn towards AEW Dark. And there wasn't too much on Dark that stood out to me. But what I did like was the Kazarian versus Austin Green match, simply because we need to see more of Kazarian. He finally has had some real impact on elite matches if he's going to be the elite hunter. But it needs to be more, because I don't know who he's supposed to face at All Out. I don't know where this elite hunter story is supposed to go. Are they priming him to be the first person that goes after Kenny loses the belt to Hangman? That seems a little weird, because Kenny shouldn't lose whatever that feud is, or at least he shouldn't in theory. If they're not, and they're going to give him a match at All Out, and that's kind of the culmination, or not necessarily the culmination, but the next step forward in the Elite Hunter story, who is he supposed to face? There really isn't a singles member in the Elite for him to face, besides Kenny. So at least having him have matches makes sense, because otherwise it's just he's doing random-ass run-ins for no reason outside of trying to foil the Elite, but we can't see where it's going, so it just feels wrong. It feels a little weird. And I really like the main event, Angelico taking on Wheeler Yuta. We had Wheeler Yuta getting that surprise win last week over Ryan Nemeth, and Wheeler Yuta talks about that during his promo segment, which, again, promo segments, and this is the main event, but the match itself is really good, and it's a nice contest back and forth between two people who are good at what they do, which is submissions. And Angelico has that added aerialist effect or aerialist ability, which Wheeler Yuta doesn't have. Well, he has it, but not as much. And that's something that really kind of is a nice contrast of styles, just because Angelico is so much more seasoned, in a sense, than Wheeler Yuta. But Wheeler Yuta can ground somebody, and that is the question of whether or not he's going to be able to negate Angelico's aerial ability. He's not able to, because Angelico does pick up the win, but a really good match and a good kind of, I guess, bodes well for the future when it comes to seeing what can be with this Forbidden Door, because I don't know if Wheeler Yuta is signed to Ring of Honor. I don't know if he's signed to New Japan. He's been on both, but either way, it's good to have this kind of talent sharing going on. So guys, let's turn towards the NWA. This was a episode of Power Surge, so not too much storyline progression. They made up for it by pulling at the heartstrings. And here we have kind of a remembering of Josephus. They replay the Billy Corgan sit-down interview from when Josephus first passed. They talk a lot about Josephus during the course of this Power Surge. And we know that our main event is going to be from an NWA pop-up event, and it's going to involve David Arquette, of all people. We have two matches that are, whatever. It's Marcia Rocket taking on Jeremiah Plunkett. Nothing too crazy there. The match is alright. And we have a triple threat, which is kind of the real main event, so to speak, at least when it comes to new stuff. And that is Jordan Clearwater taking on Papa Jive, taking on Rush Freeman. Now, this match was a little hard to cover. Because, one, Rush Freeman looks like Pam's ex from The Office. I forget the character's name. But also, Papa Jive just seems really not what we should be doing with wrestling in 2021, but I guess it works. I mean, if it's a person of color doing it, or a black guy doing it, I guess, he can make that choice freely. Cool. But it just made me think of the old shuckin' and jive stuff that Vince used to make people do, or that the idea was that Vince used to make people do. And that part was just like, do we really need that? Especially when you have somebody who's trying to push things forward like Fred Rosser, and you have somebody who is redefining character work with JTG on NWA. Take a page out of their book. And I'm not saying you got a carbon copy, though. Not at all. Make it your own. But this just, I don't know, the guy just had a little too much of that shuckin' and jive aspect to me, and that really kind of took me out of the match. The match was, I guess, alright. Jordan Clearwater kind of picked up the win the same way that I expected him to win. I expected Marsha Rockett to win. So, not really that big of a surprise when both of those guys won. Clearwater still seems a little conflicted about kind of being more of a heelish character. Black G's is there to continue to push him and progress him forward. So I guess maybe there was a little bit of storyline progression. But then again, Jordan Clearwater is not really a guy who's up there on the card. Now, one thing that they did do was they repeated part of the talk about the championship series. And this got me a little interested, because what they said was 8 champions. And I did the math. There aren't 8 championships in the NWA. World, National, TV, Women's, 2 tags. There's 6. There's 6 champions, 5 titles, if we're being accurate, which we should be. So when they say that there are 8 champions, that piques my interest. Who are these other 2 people going to be? And then on top of that, Galley was talking about how we're going to have 4 champions and 4 legends. Well, that seems a little weird, because he told me it was going to be 8 champions. So I don't know if they even know what they're doing. We'll have to see, because he said it's going to start next week, so that's something to look forward to on next week's Power. And finally, in our main event, we have David Arquette teaming up with Tim Storm as a surprise to take on Josephus and his then spiritual advisor, who is a woman, so it's kind of a fun moment of, do we hit the woman or not? And on the line is Josephus's hair. Josephus will lose the match and will get his head shaved at the end of the match. But kind of a fun little main event, especially because this was a pay-per-view pop-up event kind of thing. It's always fun to see these things. And I like that the NWA decided to take this footage, which would otherwise be behind a paywall, and kind of give it away, in the sense that it's still behind a paywall for sure, because if you want to watch the NWA on Fight, you do have to pay for a subscription, but it's a little bit more accessible to the average person, particularly because now, I mean, if you are, I guess they understand there's going to be some bootlegging that happens, but either way, if they have some of this get bootlegged, it's not the end of the world, because they are doing it to honor the memory of Josephus. And the more people that know about what Joseph Hudson, or who he was and what he did and what he meant to wrestling, the better. And that's to kind of say that we should always praise people's contributions. And I know that it's tough sometimes, because people don't always get the recognition that they deserve. And Josephus wasn't a Nick Aldis, right? Like, he wasn't a Thunder Rosa or a Darby. Like, he wasn't a big name. But for some people, he was a very important wrestler. And I like that the NWA is continuing to honor him. I always think about how they have left that flag of Monrovia up there among all the flags of the other countries that are part of the National Wrestling Alliance. So, guys, like I said, this was kind of a lull moment for the 3 shows. I'm expecting things to pick up next week as we learn more about what the championship series is, who's going to be in it, and all of that kind of fun stuff. So until next time, thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. Hit that like button, comment, share, subscribe if you haven't already. And remember to take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And until next time, I'll catch you later.